picture a financial heist. Like, what immediately pops into your head when I say that? You're probably imagining a crew of masked robbers storming a bank lobby.
Oh, yeah. Or maybe some shadowy hacker in a basement overseas, frantically typing code to smash through a firewall.
Exactly, yeah. We are so culturally conditioned to view financial threats as this external thing,
Mhm.
something on the outside actively trying to break its way in.
Right.
But the reality of modern financial crime, it operates on a completely different premise.
Sure.
I mean, what if the most systemic threat to a financial institution doesn't actually have to break in at all?
Because they're already inside.
Exactly. What if they simply badge through the front door, grab a coffee in the break room, and log in at their desk?
Oh.
So today we are taking a deep dive into this highly analytical document we've sourced. It's called The Inner Enemy: Securing Financial Integrity Against Insider Threats.
It's a fascinating read.
It really is.
Yeah.
And our mission for this deep dive is to explore exactly how trusted access is exploited in the financial sector. The specific mechanics of the damage and how institutions are attempting to redesign their defenses against the person who already holds the keys to the vault.
Yeah, and getting there requires a fundamental pivot in how organizations approach risk architecture. Because the core thesis of this text, it's that insider threats cannot be categorized simply as an HR problem.
Right.
Or even just a basic conduct issue where someone, violates a workplace rule. The document actually classifies the insider threat as a structural control risk.
Structural control risk. That is
Yeah.
a massive paradigm shift.
It's huge. Traditionally, financial crime frameworks are designed with this perimeter mindset. They're looking outward, calibrating algorithms to identify suspicious external customers, or block fraudulent incoming transactions.
Building a higher wall, basically.
Yeah. Exactly. But the insider threat subverts that entire equation. It introduces this reality that the institution's own employees or contractors, or even temporary staff, the very individuals trusted to operate those defensive systems, might be the ones undermining them.
Wow.
Yeah, they are attacking the integrity of the defense environment from the inside, which, if you think about it, essentially neutralizes all your lines of defense simultaneously.
So what does this all mean? Like, if we are fundamentally redefining the threat from an external attacker to an internal authorized user, we have to establish exactly who this inner enemy is.
Right.
Because I think when people hear insider threat, they picture a corporate spy or some criminal mastermind deliberately embedding themselves in the company.
And, that malicious actor is definitely part of the equation, but the spectrum detailed in the source material is much, much broader than that.
Okay.
On one end of the spectrum, yes, you have the malicious insider. This is an individual knowingly, intentionally abusing their system access.
For what, like money?
Yeah, their motivation could be personal financial enrichment, or maybe retaliation against their employer for a perceived slight.
Oh, like a disgruntled employee.
Exactly. Or it could be active, calculated collusion with external criminal networks. They are fully aware of the damage they're causing. But, and this is key on the opposite end of that spectrum, is the careless or compromised insider.
Wait, so just someone making mistakes?
Pretty much. This is an employee who exhibits weak security hygiene or exercises remarkably poor judgment. Or maybe they're just susceptible to external coercion.
Right.
They aren't intentionally trying to facilitate financial crime, but their actions create the exact same systemic vulnerabilities.
So it's basically the difference between a bank manager actively stealing money and a bank manager negligently propping the vault door open because it's a hot day.
That is a perfect analogy, yeah.
The intent is totally different, but the vault is still compromised either way. But let me push back on that for a second.
Yeah.
Does a purely negligent employee really do as much damage as a malicious one? Like, structurally?
Well, according to the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, which the text heavily references, the answer is yes.
Really?
Yeah. CISA purposely maintains an incredibly broad definition of an insider threat for this exact reason. Their framework focuses on the misuse of access and organizational knowledge, regardless of the intent behind it.
Ah, I see.
Both the malicious actor and the negligent actor matter tremendously because both ultimately degrade the institution's capacity to detect and prevent fraud or money laundering.
Right, the system is still broken either way.
Exactly. The operational harm stems from the misuse of authorized access. To the broader financial system, a blind spot functions the same, whether it was created by malice or sheer incompetence.
Because the access itself is the weapon.
Spot on.
Which brings us to the operational mechanics of the threat. If both malicious and careless employees are dangerous, how exactly do they bypass the billion-dollar security systems these modern banks have.
And that is where the text introduces arguably its most critical concept. It calls it the presumption of legitimacy.
The presumption of legitimacy.
Yeah. When an employee uses their authorized credentials, the system architecture just recognizes them as a trusted node.
Right, they typed in the password, they passed the multi-factor authentication on their phone.
Exactly. Therefore, the system is programmed to assume their subsequent actions are entirely legitimate. An employee with the appropriate clearance can execute commands that would immediately trigger massive critical alerts if an external IP address tried them.
Right, because they're supposed to be in there. They need access to customer data and case files and alert queues just to do their daily jobs.
They do. They need the keys to operate the machinery.
And the text gives this highly specific, frankly alarming list of what insiders actually do with those keys once that presumption of legitimacy is shielding them.
Oh, the examples are wild.
Yeah, like onboarding fictitious or high-risk customers who would normally be blocked by perimeter defenses. Or they manipulate KYC Know Your Customer records. Like mechanically, that means they might alter a client's profile from a high-risk category, like a cash-intensive business, to a low-risk category.
Like a domestic consulting firm or something.
Exactly. And by simply changing a data field they're already authorized to edit, they ensure the automated transaction monitoring algorithms apply a completely different, way looser set of logic to that client's illicit funds.
It's terrifyingly simple.
And they also actively suppress alerts. If the monitoring software does catch something suspicious and generates an alert, the insider, whose actual job is to review those alerts, simply categorizes it as a false positive and closes the file.
Yeah, the threat is functionally invisible because their malicious actions look exactly like their job description.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second.
Yeah.
Because how do you catch someone whose malicious actions perfectly mimic their daily tasks?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the text identifies an even more sophisticated methodology that goes way beyond direct manipulation like that.
Oh.
Yeah. In the most advanced scenarios, insiders don't just move money or suppress alerts. They actually provide external criminal networks with the institution's proprietary detection logic.
Wait, really? They teach the criminals how the alarm system works.
Precisely. They act as intelligence assets. They inform their criminal associates exactly how the bank's internal thresholds are calibrated.
So the red flags are never even triggered.
Exactly. They might say, hey, the anti-money laundering software automatically flags sequential wire transfers over $10,000. But it requires 3 sequential transfers to flag anything under $9,000.
Wow.
Or they explain the specific behavioral patterns the compliance team is trained to look for. And by doing this, the insider enables the precise placement and layering of illicit funds.
The criminals outside the bank can structure their transactions to perfectly navigate the blind spots.
Yep.
It functions like an autoimmune disease. I mean, the body's own defense cells, the authorized users, are actively attacking the healthy tissue because the system is inherently programmed to trust them.
That is an incredibly accurate way to view it. And the ultimate control challenge is that you can't simply revoke access to secure the system.
Right, or the bank just stops working.
Exactly. The defense relies entirely on ensuring that authorized access is constantly monitored, strictly proportionate, and logically explainable. You have to continually ask if users' behavior fits their expected baseline.
So we've established the mechanics. The authorized user weaponizes their own credentials under this presumption of legitimacy.
Yeah.
But moving from the how to the why brings us to the human element.
Right, the grooming process.
Yeah, because anyone who follows corporate risk knows the basic playbook of organized crime recruiting insiders. They look for vulnerabilities. An employee with severe gambling debts or mounting medical bills or maybe a personal grudge against the company.
Yeah, and the text notes it's usually a gradual grooming process. It starts with small gifts or favors and then escalates into emotional manipulation or outright extortion.
But what stands out in this source material isn't just the psychology of the bribe. It's the governance void that allows a compromised individual to cause systemic damage.
And that is the crucial distinction. Because look, an individual employee falling into financial distress and getting compromised by a syndicate, that's a tragedy for that individual.
Right.
But it only becomes a systemic risk to the financial institution if the operational environment allows it to be.
Oh.
The text argues you could design the most rigorous, globally compliant anti-money laundering policies in theory, but those policies are entirely neutralized if the internal governance is weak.
So if an insider can just bypass the rules anyway.
Exactly. If a compromised insider has the system privileges to independently bypass dual controls, or if they have administrative rights to wipe the audit trails of their own actions, then the written policy offers zero protection.
The source also emphasizes the cultural aspect of governance here, specifically the intimidation of junior staff.
Oh, this is a massive failure point, and it's one that regulators scrutinize heavily.
Yeah, the FCA focuses on this a lot, right?
The Financial Conduct Authority in the UK, exactly. They explicitly target governance and management oversight. Just consider a scenario where a junior compliance analyst correctly identifies a highly suspicious transaction,
Okay.
and they prepare to escalate it to the Financial Crimes Unit.
Yeah.
But their senior manager, who has been compromised by an external group, intervenes.
Oh, man.
Right. The manager leverages their authority to dismiss the concern. They tell the analyst, oh, the client is vetted, drop the investigation.
And what is the junior person supposed to do?
Exactly. If that junior analyst doesn't have a culturally reinforced, heavily protected channel to anonymously escalate that interaction, the technical control is completely overridden by hierarchical intimidation.
So the policy fails because of the culture.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, insider threat is often just a symptom of broader governance weakness. It acts as a direct conduit between the institution and organized crime.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because if the disease is structural, if it's embedded in the very architecture of how employees interact with the systems and each other, the cure cannot simply be a reactive disciplinary measure.
No, definitely not.
You can't just terminate the compromised employee and assume the problem is solved. The text details this mature defense playbook that requires redesigning the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, a mature defense strategy completely abandons the generic question of, do we trust our workforce?
Right.
Instead, it initiates a highly targeted risk assessment. It determines exactly where operational trust creates concentrated risk.
So the focus shifts to identifying those single points of failure.
Yes. The text identifies several high-exposure operational areas where trust is, unfortunately, a necessity, but it creates immense risk, like payments operations where funds are directly initiated and settled.
Or customer onboarding, where those initial risk profiles are built.
Exactly. And, critically, it involves privileged technology roles. Think about the database administrators and IT architects who possess systemic access to the entire infrastructure.
They hold all the keys.
They do. So the defense playbook dictates that access in these high-exposure environments has to be fiercely proportionate to the specific role.
And the text outlines the deployment of layered controls here. Segregation of duties is paramount. Like the architecture must technically enforce that the employee who initiates a high-value payment physically cannot be the same employee who approves its release.
Right. Dual approvals become absolutely mandatory for any sensitive database alterations.
And the system has to autonomously monitor for unusual behavioral patterns. Like, if a compliance officer whose portfolio strictly covers domestic retail accounts suddenly starts accessing the files of international commercial clients.
Or if they are logging into the database at 3 a.m. on a Sunday without a scheduled maintenance window.
Yeah, the system must immediately flag that deviation from their normal operational baseline.
Yet, the source material makes a really profound point here. Technical controls are insufficient if they operate in a vacuum.
What do you mean?
Well, a resilient institution has to cultivate what the text calls a culture of escalation. Staff across all lines of defense must be trained not just on regulatory compliance, but on the behavioral indicators of coercion.
Oh, like noticing when a coworker is acting strange.
Exactly. They need the situational awareness to recognize when a colleague is requesting system access outside their purview or attempting to extract proprietary data without a clear business justification.
Because the machine might not catch that part.
Right. Insider threats are frequently detected through the intuition and concern of a coworker long before a technical parameter is ever breached.
Which perfectly transitions into this critical structural insight provided by the U.S. Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN. The source document highlights FinCEN's guidance regarding how internal intelligence is managed, or really how it's historically siloed.
Yeah, this FinCEN insight addresses a widespread architectural flaw in banking. Traditionally, institutions have maintained completely separate divisions for investigating fraud and investigating money laundering.
Right.
These teams often operate on different floors, they use entirely different software systems, and they rarely share tactical intelligence. But FinCEN points out that the operational pathways for fraud and money laundering are deeply interconnected, especially when facilitated by an insider.
Because the mechanism is sequential.
Yeah.
Like if an insider working in retail banking uses their access to approve a synthetic identity, a fake customer profile, they've committed fraud. They
Right.
create a fraudulent account.
Yes.
But then that exact same synthetic account becomes the perfect, seemingly legitimate domestic node for an external cartel to wire illicit funds into.
Exactly. The fraud creates the infrastructure, and then the money laundering utilizes it.
So if the fraud team eventually catches the synthetic identity, but they fail to share the behavioral indicators or the IP addresses with the anti-money laundering team, the broader criminal network remains entirely intact.
It's a huge blind spot. The intelligence has to be joined up to see the complete threat landscape.
Absolutely.
And when an institution finally does synthesize that intelligence and they actually catch an insider actively manipulating the system, the reality of the remediation process is just staggering.
It's not just firing them and calling the cops.
Not at all. The operational response detailed in the text extends way beyond a law enforcement referral. Because this is a structural control risk, the discovery of a compromised insider immediately casts doubt on the integrity of the entire defense ecosystem.
The institution has to assume the autoimmune disease has spread. They have to initiate a forensic audit of every single file, account, and alert that specific employee ever interacted with during their entire tenure.
Precisely. They have to determine the full blast radius.
The blast radius, wow.
Yeah. They have to verify if critical KYC data was covertly altered, which could expose the bank to massive regulatory fines. They must assess if active sanctions controls were bypassed.
So they aren't just cleaning up the immediate mess.
Right.
The remediation process requires the institution to structurally redesign the control environment to ensure the specific vulnerabilities the insider exploited are permanently eradicated. It is an exhaustive, enterprise-wide undertaking just to reestablish the defensibility of their own internal data.
Wow. So to synthesize this deep dive for you listening, the crucial takeaway from our source material today is that insider threats within the financial sector totally transcend the narrative of a rogue bad apple employee.
Yeah,
They represent a deep structural vulnerability. It is a dynamic where the very access required to operate a modern bank is quietly weaponized to facilitate fraud, enable money laundering, and serve external criminal networks. And defending against this reality demands a departure from purely perimeter-based security. It requires a layered, culturally integrated defense mechanism that continuously monitors and verifies how operational trust is being utilized.
I want to leave you with a final concept to consider, building on the underlying mechanics we've analyzed today.
The entirety of the modern financial system, and really any complex digital infrastructure, is built upon the foundational requirement of authorized access. We must grant humans the power to operate the systems.
Right, there has to be a human at the keyboard somewhere.
Exactly. But if the presumption of legitimacy, that program necessity to inherently trust the actions of an authenticated user, is the exact mechanism that blinds an institution to its own exploitation, is the concept of operational trust itself inherently a security flaw? Can any complex organization ever achieve true systemic security if its fundamental architecture requires it to blindly trust human behavior just to function?
That is a profound structural question to ponder. As you navigate your own professional environment this week, take a moment to critically analyze the systems of trust that surround you. Consider who holds the keys, how their baseline behavior is verified, and what mechanisms truly prevent them from quietly dismantling the defenses from the inside. Thank you for joining us, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.